What is up, boomers? I am sick and tired of listening to you guys say silly things like, millennials and Gen Z just don't want to work. Maybe they could afford a house if they'd quit buying them Starbucks Kappa lattes and Apple earphones. Back in my day, we had to save our money and work for a living. I worked my tail off bagging groceries at the Ingles making $2 an hour, and I saved up every penny so I could buy me a brand new house and a 67 Shelby Mustang to haul my stay-at-home wife and 3 kids in. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about, and it is this absolute nonsense that drives me crazy. And instead of having to explain how ridiculous you are every single time I hear one of you say it, I'm just going to send you a link to this video so I don't have to keep repeating myself. So let's dive in. All right, what you're looking at here is a chart that I made based on FRED data, which, if you're not aware, FRED stands for the Federal Reserve Economic Data System. FRED is a massive database where the Federal Reserve publishes all of their economic stats, which are used by people like economists, lawmakers, researchers, and journalists, except the fake news, who rely on accurate data. This is where we get the official stats on GDP, inflation, wages, housing, and employment. And no, these aren't just some rectally sourced statistics that you'd get from Jesse Waters or your crazy grandma's Facebook post. This is real data from the real Federal Reserve. To put it as simply as possible, these are raw numbers without anyone's opinion or political bias embedded into them. Also, we have 2024 and 2025 data for everything except median household income, which upsets me so much because I would love to show you just how wacky these numbers have gotten in the last 2 years. They released this data in 5-year blocks, and the last set was from 2019 to 2023, but I digress. Sometimes FRED might not have very specific data, so I have an additional source here from the North Carolina Fiscal Research Division, or FRD. I'm using the NCFRD data specifically for median single-family home prices. FRED has excellent data for median home prices, but not so much for specifically single-family home prices, which is what I care about here. And the last thing I want is for one of you to complain about how my data is flawed because it includes 8-bedroom houses or something like that, which could drastically change the median data set. Now, I've marked each year using the NCFRD data with a green box beside of each row. Next up, marked with red boxes, we have the Zillow Home Value Index, or ZHVI, which is pricing data for all homes including single-family residences, condos, and co-ops in North Carolina. The NCFRD data stops at 2020, so for my 2021 through 2023 data, I had to use ZHVI. I know it includes more than just single-family homes, which is really what I wanted to avoid here, but unfortunately, as of right now, this is the best data I can get for the last 3 years of my chart. But I'm not convinced the numbers are off too far, as having things other than single-family homes doesn't always mean more expensive, as some of the earlier numbers are lower than what NCFRD reports for single-family homes. So yes, sometimes the number is a bit higher, but this is the best that we've got right now. You're probably sitting there saying, you skipped over the brown boxes, and you'd be right, but this one is going to require a bit more explaining, so I saved it for last. Prior to the year 2000, we don't have any ZHVI data, and the NCFRD data covers us all the way back to 1990. But your very rigid brain probably noticed that my chart here goes back for another 6 years to 1984. So, how did I get the data from 1984 through 1989? Well, FRED has something called the All Transactions House Pricing Index for North Carolina. The pricing index uses the home values in the first quarter of 1980 as a baseline, assigning them an index value of 100. And as a price increases or decreases, its value will rise to 110 or fall to 90, for example, which again is based on its value in 1980. This is how price appreciation is measured, and while it's not a direct dollar estimate, it's one of the most widely used indicators to estimate historical home value trends. For instance, I happen to know the exact dollar amount that my current house was sold for brand new back in the 80s. And when using this estimate, it comes very, very close to it. It ain't going to get you down to the exact dollar, but it's going to be plenty close enough for what we're using it for here. All right, now I'm going to explain how the chart works so that it can hopefully make a little more sense to you. Starting here in the top left, we have the year going from 1984 down to 2023. Also, I'll point out that I'm using January 1st data for everything on the list here. So no, I'm not cherry picking from different months throughout each year to make my data more favorable for my point. Next, I've listed the median single family home price for each year. The next column is what the home price number is in 2023 dollars. And this is where that CPI data comes into play. All you have to do is take the current year's CPI number, divide it by the old year's CPI number, and then multiply that answer by the old year's dollar value to get today's dollar amount. Again, in our case, we're pretending that we live in 2023 because that's the last of our single family income data. So for instance, in 2023, the CPI number is 300.46. So we divide that number by 1984's CPI number, which is 102.1. And now we can multiply that number by our average home price in 1984, which is $54,983, which gives us $161,801 and some change. And that is how every one of these inflation adjusted columns works. The next column is the percent change from the previous year on the chart. And just like the inflation adjusted columns, I have one of these for home prices, median income, and the minimum wage. In this column, we have the median household income, not talking about the breadwinner only here, we're talking about household income. Next, we have the home to salary ratio, which is essentially just showing how much the median home costs in relation to the median household income each year. In 1984, the median home price was $54,983 divided by the median income, which was $20,570, and you get a ratio of 2.67, meaning the median home price was about 2.67 times the median income. This one gets really fun later. In this next column, we have the North Carolina minimum wage for each year. Following that, I went ahead and multiplied the minimum wage by 2,080 to give you the salary at that wage. By the way, 2,080 is the amount of hours you work if you work 40 hours a week for 52 weeks. Down here at the bottom, I have the total increase for each column from 1984 to 2023 to kind of summarize the chart. And lastly, down here at the bottom left are the CPI values that are used as a reference for the inflation equations, and above them are my sources. They will all be linked in the description of this video so you can fact check me for any errors. All right, let's finally dig into the data. Starting on the left here, you can see that in the last 39 years, single-family home prices have increased from roughly $54,983 to $321,127. That's an increase of about $266,144, or 484.05% over the last 39 years. Looking at the inflation-adjusted column, this shows us the median home price has increased by $159,325 even after adjusting for inflation. That is absolutely insane. Now, here's where a lot of people say things like, yeah, but people make so much more money nowadays compared to when I was working, so it balances out. I'm glad you brought that up, Boomer Me. So, how has the median income fared in comparison? Let's take a look. In 1984, the median household income was roughly $20,570. In 2023, that number has increased to $68,610. Now, that's an increase of $48,000 or 233.54%. Sounds pretty good, right?
Wrong.
In reality, when you remove inflation from the equation, that's only an increase of about $8,077. Looking over here at this big, beautiful graph, that's what everyone calls it. Nobody can make a graph like I can. We can see just how insane the median single-family home price has risen in comparison to the median household income. This is why my generation isn't popping out kids like a Pez dispenser and buying houses like hotcakes. A little background. So, I graduated high school in 2018 and I was 17 years old. I turned 18 towards the end of 2018, but it wasn't until 2019 when I could finally get through the doors of where I work now, which is one of the best paying manufacturing plants within an hour of where I live. In 2019, I still made nowhere near the amount that I would need to buy one of these houses. $18 an hour was not enough for a home and was hardly enough for rent. But that's an entirely different scam for another day. So, by the time I was getting into the job market, it was already too late for me. If you remember anything from this video, this graph is probably the most important. Next, we have the home to salary ratio column, which again is just how much of the annual household income it takes to buy the median home. Here's what these numbers look like plotted on a graph. So, we can see that in 1984, the median single-family home cost 2.67 times the median household income. That's the lowest ratio we have on the chart here. Can you guess where the highest ratio is? That's right, 2023. In 2023, the median home cost 4.68 times the median household income. That's like if you went back in time to 1984 here and paid $96,267 for that $54,983 home. So, let's flip the script and imagine paying 2.67 times the median household income for the median home today. What would that look like? Well, we just take the $68,610, multiply it by 2.67, and we get $183,188. In 2023, that price range is going to get you a low-end home, probably a trailer, on a quarter acre of land. Whereas in 1984, $54,983 could get you a pretty nice house with a decent amount of land. Now, let's move over to the minimum wage column. I added this in to explain to you smooth brains how ridiculous you sound when you say, "They's wanting $15 an hour to flip burgers down at the McDonald's when they can't even get my order right or write in cursive," or whatever other nonsense you guys say. In 1984, the North Carolina minimum wage was $2.90. That's a salary of $6,032 per year. In 2023 dollars, that's the equivalent to $8.53 an hour, or $17,751 per year. So, what do things look like in 2023? Well, the last time minimum wage was raised was all the way back in 2010. That was 15 years ago, by the way. In 2023 dollars, the 2010 minimum wage of $7.25 is equivalent to $10.02 per hour today, or $20,833 per year. In the past 39 years, the minimum wage has increased $4.35 an hour. When we adjust it for inflation, minimum wage workers today earn less purchasing power than they did back in 1984. 15.05% less, in fact. So while it looks like they make $9,048 more, after we adjust for inflation, it's actually $2,670.74 less. Over here on the median household salary to minimum wage salary comparison graph, we see that the median household salary has increased exponentially in comparison to the minimum wage salary. Hey, lean in here. Let me tell you a little secret. This right here is how the rich skew the numbers. As they rake in more money, the median rises. It's not because working class folks are doing better. The poor are getting poorer as the rich get richer. So, how are people at the bottom supposed to pick themselves up by the bootstraps if they can't afford basic things like rent, groceries, or anything else? I mean, could you imagine making $7.25 an hour today? Think about how expensive literally everything is, because houses are not the only things that have increased this drastically. These people cannot survive on what they're being paid. And old Dementia Don is out here slashing SNAP and Medicaid, the only things that are keeping these people from starving, just to give his billionaire golf buddies more tax breaks. This is wrong, it's evil, and if we don't stop it now, it's going to be too late. And buddy, if you think your little landscaping company is going to keep you afloat, you better learn to swim. That's all I've got.